Yes, this time they are coming for your guns. Out-of-state anti-gun billionaires spent millions to get radical politicians elected in order to take over the Virginia General Assembly. And now, those anti-rights politicians are paying back that dirty money in spades. An assault weapon ban, magazine ban, restaurant carry ban, and new 3-day waiting period bills were recently filed. And if they get their way, there is even a bill that would prevent you from carrying your lawfully owned pistol to visit your own mother in the hospital. These radical tyrants will stop at nothing to see you defenseless. That is their final goal. But we at the VCDL, like we always do, will be there too. Lobby Day 2024 is January 15th, and we need you to help us turn back the tide of anti-rights legislation in Richmond. Join us to lobby your representatives and help us say no to these extremist bills that would do nothing to prevent real crime, but that would leave you and your family defenseless against criminals. Go to vcdl.org/LD24 today to find out about ride sharing, bus info, and the latest info on how to make your voice heard. Because your right to protect yourself and your family is not negotiable.
Back. Anyway, while I'm working on getting Philip in this scene, you did. Let's see. Replace
There I am.
with.
I'm
There
on the
we go.
stage now. Woohoo!
Yay!
Yay!
Okay. Still
I
figuring out
worried that
this
maybe I
technology.
died and didn't know it. Okay.
Didn't know it. Anyway, welcome everybody. It is Sunday night, January 7th. It is the Sunday night before the pre-lobby day dinner, and that's why we're doing this a week early. We have two guests with us tonight. Dan Wos is an author and vlogger and does a lot of 2A stuff. Anyway, he has a book series called Good Gun, Bad Guy. I'm in the middle of book 1. Sorry, I don't have a lot of reading time, but excellent so far. And Stephen Colebrook is with us. He is a recent U.S. citizen from Australia, and he's going to tell us his story about the difference between Australia and here. So, Philip, do you want to go ahead and start us off for the evening?
Sure. Yeah. And I welcome both of our guests. I've known Dan for a while. I posted some of his stuff on VA Alert. He's a hell of a good writer. And Stephen, I can't wait to hear all of his story. I've heard some of it, and it's it's one of these examples I give of sometimes people that come from other countries to America appreciate what we have here, and we're willing to fight for it harder than some of us will. We have, a Russian immigrant that is an absolute firecracker, Layla, and we've had lots of those over the years. Several from Russia that really appreciate this, and other places around the world. There's I'll also later on I'll discuss a little bit about some of the bills and stuff going to the General Assembly. But I think we'll start off with with Dan, if you want to do
I'm laughing at Michael's comment here. With our technical difficulties in the past, he says throw salt over the left shoulder to ward off bad luck because he can hear us all and see us all. So.
Whoa! Did you have to say that? Yeah, now the Zoom gods are gonna knock us offline.
Yep. Anyway, go ahead, Dan.
Well, hey, I'm glad to be here on the show, and I'm looking forward to next weekend. And you guys always seem to bring out the support. It's unbelievable. A few years ago, the obvious big event, I was there, and proud to be there. And that's one thing that's going to go down in history, was that event at your state house there. It was just unbelievable. Just amazing how when the tyrants come in Virginia, the real Americans, the patriots, come out and fight them. It's unbelievable. You guys are awesome patriots.
Yeah, the turnout is amazing. But unfortunately, the turnout, like in those numbers, are driven when we're under the gun, if you will, as opposed to when times are good and we could be pushing hard for forward momentum. Sometimes people don't get involved then when they should, when we can, move things forward. But we do have it. Most of our members are absolutely top notch at getting out and getting stuff done. So we're very lucky.
Uh-oh. We
Yeah, I see
lost Dan.
Dan's got a problem.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
oh, here you
there
back.
he is. There he
Yeah,
is.
I don't
Yeah.
know what happened there. I lost. All you guys went dark, and I was the only one on the screen there. That's all.
Okay, it was just the opposite here. Where did Dan go? Hey,
So
yeah,
Dan,
see, we were jinxed that somebody had to say something, and that was there it went.
yes. Dan, one of the things that I noticed in your book is that you said that at one time you were on the other side of the fence with firearms ownership. Do you want to talk about
You
that a
know,
little bit?
when I wrote the first book, I talked to my editor, Bill Dolan, great guy. He helped me out a lot with that first book, as did Jan Morgan. If it wasn't for those two, that book would have never seen the light of day. But Bill Dolan, I told Bill, I said, should I mention in the book that I was at one time kind of, on the anti-gun side? I said, I don't really want to. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. And he said, no. He said, you have to say that. That's the point. And I thought about it. I'm like, it kind of is. It kind of is the point. So briefly, my story is, I was raised in a pro-gun family. My dad took me hunting and target shooting when I was a kid. It was fun. We had a good time. I was a guitar. I've been a guitar player my whole life. I played guitar in rock bands my whole life. So I was more interested in guitar. I wasn't really interested in guns. It was kind of his thing. So then what happened is I started touring in bands, and I would go on the road with rock bands, and I was playing in bands all through my teens and 20s. And it sort of, some of them were kind of on the left politically, and you start hanging out with those people, and that stuff gets in your head. And I always say I was kind of hanging with the wrong crowd, and it wasn't drug dealers or bank robbers; it was anti-gun liberals. So what happened was I kind of, in a way, went that way. And it wasn't until I had an incident in my life when I realized that, man, I gotta protect my wife and my family and myself, and what the heck. And we had an incident, as a matter of fact. My wife and I had an incident. I tell the story in the book. One night in Albany, New York, with this guy, and I realized at that moment that the way I was thinking about guns was all wrong. But the real thing that interested me about how was it that a kid from a pro-gun family, was able to get kind of turned around in that narrative, and kind of look at guns in a negative way. And it's because of the propaganda and the rhetoric and all the narrative that the anti-gun crowd puts out. So I started studying that stuff, and that's when the book started coming together, is because I started to understand what they do to you, what they do to people to convince them that guns are bad, gun owners are worse, guns are evil and dangerous and all this stuff. But when you really look at all the statistics, it's exactly wrong. It's 180 degrees off. And I probably turned into the most pro Second Amendment person you'll meet, and it's amazing the way the brain works. And that's what fascinated me through the whole thing, is how it is that people can be so easily manipulated through propaganda and terminology. We talk about gun violence and assault weapon and ghost guns and weapons of war, all this nonsense that they put out there to scare people who don't know any better. So that's been my mission, is trying to expose, the anti-gun lies in the media. And that's where it started. It's turning into, I don't know what it's turning into now, because it's gone in all different directions for me. I've been so lucky, and to have, the success that I've been having is just amazing, and the people have been so supportive. And but that's how it started for me. Yeah, it was.
I, I will I'll say, Dan, that I had maybe a similar experience. I was never anti-gun at all. That was never the case. But I didn't really understand how thorough my rights were until I got my permit to carry concealed and started looking at all the gun magazines. I was sitting in Hawaii on vacation reading gun magazines. My wife looked at me like I was nuts. I'm sitting on the beach reading this stuff. And that's when I started reading about how I'd basically been lied to by the schools, by the government, by the newspapers. It's sort of like if somebody was pulling off the sting, where they've got a bunch of people coordinated to make something look real that really is a sham. In this case, you got the government telling you something, the newspapers and magazines reinforcing it. You got schools kind of not really talking about it. And so you start to believe, well, okay, it's a group right and blah, blah, blah. Once I learned the truth, like you, they made one hell of an enemy out of me. I said, this is war. I'm going to make sure that other people don't fall for this.
Yeah, and like I said, it's for some people it's hard to change their mindset. You're locked into this narrative, into this belief structure for so long. It's hard for some people to change because what does that mean about me? What kind of person am I if I thought the wrong thing and then have to admit that I was wrong. So it's always a struggle for people. That's why it's hard to get people on the left to come over and really understand what's going on over here. But I wasn't afraid to do that. I said, well, screw it. I want the truth and I want to understand it. And once I started to learn and I started to understand, and it turns into a lot of psychology stuff. So you start finding yourself studying psychology because that's really what this is all about. And so I've studied some psychology and understand how easy it really is to convince people of things. It's not difficult. And if you have the right tools and the right media and the right strategies, you can do it. And hey, it happened to me, and I'm here to talk about it.
Yeah, a lot of times when you're debating, if you're debating somebody, even if it's somebody that's on the other side, you'll never convince. The important people are the ones that are watching this on the fence.
Yeah.
Because then they get to hear both sides of this. They get to see who's rational, who's acting irrational, and that absolutely can swing people. I've seen it swing them really fairly fast sometimes.
But one of the things. Oh, go ahead.
That's one of the things about testifying in committee meetings. Even when you know that a bill is going to go a certain way and it not the way you want to go, if you are testifying, you're talking to the people that are voting for the people that are on these committees. So, and as Michael says, we are a nation divided, and the political machine instigates that division and uses it to keep us not focused on the issue, but focused on the bickering.
And I noticed another post there from looks like Theron. It's a Mark Twain quote, and I've seen that before, and it was really profound when I first saw that. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled. And what I always say is, the main component of being brainwashed is to believe that you could never be brainwashed. And that's what's happening to a lot of people on the political left, and they don't know it, they don't believe it, and it's hard to get through to people because they don't want to ever admit that they've been thinking about something in the wrong way, with the wrong information, the wrong data, and the wrong, statistics. In this case, with guns, it's statistics and stuff. When I first saw the Gary Kleck study, I was shocked. It said 2.5 million defensive gun uses per year, and we find out that the vast majority of those, the trigger was never pulled. And when I saw that, I was like, wow. This, what I've been told from the mainstream media, is completely opposite. And so there's a lot of lies out there, and you just have to sift through them and try to figure out what's true and what's not.
But it's so hard, Dan, because look at all the self-defense shootings, or even, as you say, just even brandishing a gun to stop a violent crime. The media doesn't report on that.
No,
they don't. So if you go by I have people in committee that the gun control crowd, one guy comes up every year and says, well, I don't think I never see anybody in the news using their gun to protect themselves. So I don't think it's and you and I and anybody looking at this has seen all these stories, maybe even personal things that have come up,
Sure.
but the media doesn't cover it, so it
It
doesn't
depends
exist.
on what news you're watching.
Even left wing, Georgetown University did a study that they didn't really, probably you didn't really see much of. You guys may not even have heard of it, but it was a study about defensive gun uses. Georgetown University. Now this is a liberal think tank over there, and they came up with 1.67 million defensive gun uses per year in
Yeah.
America. And why isn't the news talking about that? Because they don't want you to know that. It doesn't help them with their push for gun control. So that's the game. We have to understand the game, and that's why I wrote the book series. And the book series is kind of like the rule book that they never wanted you to see.
Yeah. And
So
Stephen, go ahead.
go
Go ahead,
ahead,
Pat.
Philip.
I was going to say, Stephen, why don't we get a little idea about your story at this point, too, since we're talking about guns and how the government can and the
And
papers can talk, lie to you and everything else. Tell us
lies,
about
yeah.
tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. It's really interesting hearing Dan's story and some of the parallels in my life on the other side of the world. Many of you may have heard of the Port Arthur massacre. I hear it brought up a lot over here in the gun control debate. For the benefit of those who aren't familiar with it, the young man who suffered a mental breakdown, stole his mother's rifle, shot her, if I recall correctly, stole her car, drove to a tourist attraction in Tasmania, that's the island state at the bottom of Australia, and shot, I think there was around 20-something people, mostly in a cafe, all completely taken by surprise, defenseless. And that really brought the gun debate to a head in Australia. I was in high school at the time, and it's interesting looking back. I agreed with a lot of the things that the talking heads on the television said, because the talking heads on the television said them. I didn't know. I'd never been hunting. I didn't know anything about guns. But of course, you shouldn't need more than one round to shoot something when you're hunting. You don't need a semi-automatic. You must be a bad hunter, because the talking heads said so. They didn't know
Stephen, I'm
anything
going to
about
interrupt you for a minute. Some of the people are having a little trouble hearing you. I don't know if you're using your computer microphone. Maybe move a little closer to the computer.
Sure. Let me.
That's a little better. And by the way, I don't know that we actually said it, but Stephen's from Australia and he moved here for a little freedom. But that's why he knows a lot about that shooting down there.
It'd be really hard to tell that I'm not from Virginia.
Right.
So,
Yes.
and the reason we asked him to join us tonight is because he wrote us an email saying that this is his first lobby day as a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
And said a few other things that really impressed us with his story about how you hear in America about how Australia is so great with their anti-crime incentives, quote unquote. But crime has gone rampant since they took away any means of viable self-defense from the populace.
Yeah. So the Port Arthur massacre really started the whole, gun control crackdown, I guess, for want of a better word, in Australia. Pretty much anything more than a bolt-action rifle was banned. I can still see in my head news reports of guns being piled up in police stations as people were forced to turn them in and be destroyed. And so what happens when there's a power vacuum? Something fills it. You see that in geopolitics, so it's no different in this case. The people have no means of self-defense. Knife crime went through the roof. Australia does actually take its border very seriously, so importing and smuggling things in is quite difficult. So because so many guns were removed from the marketplace, criminals did find it more difficult to get their hands on some. Of course, many gangs, that was not a problem for them. There was still lots of gun crime. There's still lots of mass shootings in Australia. But knife crime for a lot of petty criminals was off the charts. And so the government's response to that was, well, let's give the police the power to stop and search anybody, anytime, anywhere, for any reason. They don't need probable cause. So how would that work here? Of course, the very people who want to take our right to self-defense away would immediately cite the Fourth Amendment, and they would cite that as an individual right because of the phrase "the right of the people," which they think means something entirely different 2 lines up in the Bill of Rights. I always find the logical leaps they go to quite extraordinary. As somebody who until very recently was an outsider.
I saw a protest. I don't know. I mean, it was probably 3 or 4 years after the gun ban, and people were protesting in large numbers. I don't know if it was in Sydney, but they were complaining about hot burglaries. In other words, now all of a sudden, people were breaking in their home knowing that somebody was in the home. In America, if you do that, there's a good chance you're going to get shot. But if the criminal knows that they're not going to get shot, then they figure, well, we can break in. We got a wife to rape, and we got wallets in the house, and we can,
gangs of people with machetes. So you can go to any hardware store, get yourself a machete. Yeah, it's a big piece of sharp steel, and home invasions all throughout the city. I lived in Sydney. There were people being attacked, people being murdered in their homes. There was a murder 1 block from our house in the middle of suburbia. That was it really went crazy. And of course, the depending on who was in government at the time determined whether the media made a big deal of it or not. Media in Australia is very fair and balanced, just like they are here. So most of the time you didn't really get the truth of what was going on. You had to find out about it through other channels, or look at crime statistics yourself. A lot of the gang violence that the police were trying to pretend it wasn't there because it made them look bad, but you can't keep murders, a spate of murders quiet for too long. And sure enough, it started to come out. But the right of the people to defend themselves was gone. In fact, I had to go back to Australia last year to visit family, and so I looked at the defence laws to see what I could take with me. And you can't even carry a pocket knife, a folding pocket knife, around with you. If you need to have a knife for your work, you can keep it on you while you're working. As soon as you finish work, if you want to stop and have drinks with your friends after work, the knife has to stay in your work truck, that kind of thing. If you carry it on you, you can be arrested. It's really quite draconian. And of course, criminals don't care. They still carry whatever they're going to carry. If they've committed in their heart that they're willing to take somebody's life, a minor property possession charge is the least thing that's going to influence them.
They tend to use crime as the excuse to take our rights away. Oh, we got to do something about crime. And here in America, of course, we were seeing the true trend of more guns is less crime. We've seen that for years. As gun ownership soared, crime was dropping in America. So they ended up defunding the police and turning criminals loose, things to treacherously drive the crime rate up by putting more criminals out there and stuff, and then going, oh, it must be the guns. Well, no, now they're bragging that the crime rate's dropping because an election's coming up this year. Oh, no, the crime rate's going down. We're in good shape. Well, gun sales have continued to soar. So it's a reminder that the two are in opposite ends, more guns, less crime. So,
Philip just revealed their dirty little secret. And what that is that they really do want crime to go up. And they especially want gun-related crimes to go up, because without gun-related crimes, they have no fuel to push for gun control. And you'll see, like Philip said, wherever there's more gun restrictions, there's more crime because people are unarmed and helpless. And where there's more concealed carry, there's less crime, because you're not going to attack somebody if you don't know. And that's why these gun-free zones are so dangerous. And we could talk about gun-free zones too. But I wanted to touch on, Stephen was talking, with Australia and stuff. I did a lot of work on Australia gun laws when I was researching for my books, and I still do. And they had two major Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had two major gun bans in 96 and in 02. And a lot of the narrative around that was just to prevent so-called suicides. And there's all these suicides or whatever. They used suicides as a tool, to push for gun control. And the truth is, after they banned guns in Australia, suicide rate didn't change. Because if you're going to kill yourself, you're going to find the means, no matter what. If you don't have a gun, and like Stephen said, now it's just knives. You're not going to take the evil out of people by removing guns. They know that, but they don't. It's really not about the criminals. It's about guys like Stephen and me and all of us. We're the ones that they don't want to have guns, because
Right.
we're their political opposition. If anybody's going to rise up, it's going to be people like us. It's not going to be criminals. Criminals aren't going to go and push back on the government. It's us. We're the ones who are going to do that. That's why the gun control laws and all the restrictions, background checks, registries, and serialization, all that stuff is designed for us.
Yeah, and I certainly, it's hard for me. It's going to be tough this year again in General Assembly, because you just want to tell these guys, and maybe I will. You swore an oath to defend and protect the Constitution. You're putting in a bill that won't let me carry an AR-15. You do realize that that's absolutely protected by the Constitution. You want to call it a weapon of war? Call it a weapon of war. I'm allowed. My right to own a weapon of war is protected by the Second Amendment specifically, because that's what a militia would have. But it really gets tiring that I just want to basically also shoot down the whole premise about crime, because Virginia is the 9th safest state in the country. We don't have a major problem with crime here. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be because we have 750,000 concealed handgun permit holders and open carry is constitutional? Could that have anything to do with it? Well, I don't know. Funny, cross the border and go into D.C. and see what happens with the crime rate. Go into Maryland and watch what happens.
It's funny you should bring Maryland up. There was a gun store burglary in Loudoun County recently, and turns out that the cars were stolen, driven into the gun store at 4:00 in the morning. Well, the perpetrators were from Baltimore, and they came down here, stole cars to steal guns to take back to Baltimore, the evil AR-15s, and that they're not allowed to buy in Maryland. So the criminals don't care if it's against the law for them to have it. By definition, a criminal is doing something that is against the law, right?
Yeah, I think we have to stop pretending that gun control is even tied to criminality in any way. It's not. It's got nothing to do with crime. It's got everything to do with our liberty and being able to protect ourselves. The crime is just a sham, and maybe at some point we need to stop playing this stupid game. But it's always tempting, because we can show that crime isn't high in areas. I mean, they want to take away the right of somebody like Pat and I and you guys that have concealed carry permits and have been carrying in restaurants for concealed and having a meal. In Virginia, you can't drink, but you can carry there. And we've had that since 2010. There have been no incidents, but there's a bill in to take it away. And we can actually say that bill is focused not on criminals at all, because they can't carry there legally anyhow. It's focused on the most honest and best citizens that Virginia has. And go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Phil.
Oh, that's fine. I was done.
If part of the reason why I think that they try to ban create gun-free zones and stuff. Gun-free zones are absolutely the most dangerous places to be on Earth. I won't be in a gun-free zone. So what happens is, I think the reason that they want to do that is they don't want good guys killing bad guys. And you would think that, well, why is that? Because they want to protect the bad guys? Well, not really. They don't want to be proven wrong. They don't want us to prove to them that crime can be stopped by good guys with guns. And the minute that starts to happen, crime will stop, and and the world will know that the gun grabbers are wrong. They've been trying to ban this, concealed carry or whatever, because they can't let that happen. If the bad guys started getting popped off when they start going in and killing people would realize that, hey, wait a minute, this actually works, carrying a gun in public. It actually works to save lives. And they
And
just
it I'm sorry.
no, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. It goes deeper than that though, because if you do stop a crime, if you use a gun in self-defense, whether you fire the gun or not, you're demonized. You took the law into your own hands, or
Hmm.
you're a vigilante
Vigilante.
a-hole,
Right.
or I mean, after we had an attempted armed robbery, which was stopped with a firearm without firing a shot, the aftermath was worse in a lot of ways than the actual trauma of the attempted armed robbery, because people called us for weeks after that and called us names, and oh, they were hateful. And you're already traumatized from being a potential victim, and then to have it piled on by people that are supposed to be good people, and they were just brutal.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is a mindset that is, how can I say this? It's promoted so that people are more dependent on the government to save them.
Of course.
Well, yeah, you want the government. You don't. What do you need a gun for? We got the government. It can
Right.
save you. I see a comment from Cody Claxton where he said, Dan, it's worse than that. They think criminals do crime because they're oppressed. But I would argue that they're saying that and they're making a big deal out of that because they want to turn these guys back into the street to get them busy, killing, murdering, raping, robbing, so they can call for gun control. That's
See,
the excuse.
right.
People have lost their understanding of history. Where did we come up with the concept of police from? Police weren't really created to go and protect us from crime, because at that point in time, everybody was perfectly capable of protecting themselves, because everybody was armed to the teeth. Because back then, people's brains seemed to work better. Police were formed to protect the criminal, so that mobs didn't go and kill
Mm.
people who would later turn out to be innocent. The police are there to investigate the crime and do the paperwork. The police are not there to protect you, because the police are not there to protect you. You see T-shirts and things. 9mm is
Yeah.
faster than 911.
Yes.
That's
Well,
yeah,
that
that's the
makes
bottom line, isn't it?
makes a great deal of sense that in the sense that yeah, and think about it today. I mean, yeah, the police, their job is to enforce the law, but they're not there as your security guard. That's what a lot of the people miss. It's like,
Supreme
okay,
Court has ruled
call
on
the
that.
police and tell them you want an officer stationed out of your home tonight because you're worried about your ex-spouse coming over. See what they tell you. Oh yeah, we'll station somebody outside your home all night just to watch it. You know,
If you're
it's
lucky,
not
you
their
get
job.
a passing patrol. The Supreme Court said the government does not owe you protection, so
Yeah.
your safety's on you. So act like an adult.
The other thing you'll
Absolutely.
learn, the other thing you'll learn from listening to somebody like Stephen is some of the immigrants know a hell of a lot more about our Constitution and our rights. Because you had to pass a test and all that. But I
I
guarantee,
passed this and take an oath to defend the Constitution, just like
yes,
the people
yeah,
in the
yes.
military.
You know, you're the kind of. I mean, if every
Carry on
immigrant
the
that came in was like
threat.
you, if every immigrant that came in this country was like you, we wouldn't have any problems at all. The ones that come in the front door are generally very good. The back door is a real problem. You know, if you're going to
Yeah,
come visit me, you better come in the front door and not come crawling in the back window. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. And you'll find most legal migrants, their opinion about the current immigration situation in the US is
You
most
don't like it.
accurately described with words we probably shouldn't use
Yes.
in this polite company.
And they would
Most
be
of us
right.
really object to people who are willingly breaking the law and exploiting this country, not wanting to come and be a part of it.
I could see that.
Yeah.
You've come in the front door. You went through all the paperwork, all the expense, all the time. And yes, it is. It's that they were going to make some changes. They could make a little changes to the front door. I have seen some of that process, and it's a little ridiculous. Bureaucracies get involved, and the world gets very complicated. But needless to say, yeah, somebody that comes in the front door like that has got a vested interest in the country staying the way it was that brought them here in the first place. You are an American citizen. You've got all the rights and privileges of anybody that was born here. So you've got, you've got a vested interest. And anyhow, it's great to see. But we're a nation of immigrants that came in through front doors, mostly.
So, Stephen, I think you signed up to be a team leader, didn't you? Did you not?
No,
Okay.
I haven't. I've never been to Lobby Day before. I've seen it on television of the 2022. It was actually the 2022 Lobby Day that really sort of gave me a bit of a spine when it came to guns. I seen the lead up to that and some interviews Philip gave on radio and on TV, and then to watch how Lobby Day went, and then how it was portrayed afterwards, and this real dichotomy between what actually happened and the way the TV stations presented it was really quite an eye-opener for me. And at that point I knew I needed to learn more, and that was sort of really the beginning of my journey to becoming a gun owner myself.
Well, in 2020, when we had the massive rally, the press just couldn't accept that, doggone it, all those gun owners, there has to be an arrest. There had to be an arrest. There had to be something. So after the thing had shut down for a couple hours, everybody's gone and dispersed. Some woman 3 blocks away that had nothing to do with this was arrested for wearing a mask.
Which, by the way, as cold as it was, even the police were wearing things over their face. Everybody was wearing some sort of a muffler, mask, or hats, and it was frigid that day.
And that became the one person that there was an arrest at this rally. It was like, what?
2020, arresting somebody for wearing a mask. My goodness.
And then blaming it on us.
Right.
What was so interesting about that event was that the people were so nice, and I think that's what made the media so mad. People were actually picking up garbage on the way out. They didn't want to litter the streets.
I saw some pictures of somebody scraping gum off the sidewalk.
The greatest people you could meet are gun owners. Some of the most responsible and respectful people. Can I make a comment on Tom? A post here, a comment?
Sure.
Tom's talking about guns on school campuses, and I thought it was important to mention that in 1990, Joe Biden introduced a thing called the Crime Control Act. And in that Crime Control Act was the Gun-Free School Zones Act. And that Gun-Free School Zones Act is responsible for tons of death. And what happened ever since that thing was signed into law, school killings have doubled because there's nobody on campus now who can protect the kids. And every 10 years, those death rates increase at twice the rate every 10 years, because what they've done is they've removed people like if I would go and pick up my son from school, and if something broke out, I would have a gun on me. But that stopped, and you can't do that. And even teachers and staff who many would be likely inclined to carry a gun can't do it anymore. And they've even demonized school security officers from carrying. My school, one of the schools up here in New York, Saratoga Springs, we had to fight just to get them to put 2 armed security guards at the school, because the liberals on the school board wanted everybody unarmed and helpless. It's
Well,
sickening.
let me tell you where it didn't go up, Dan. The school shootings did not go up in Utah.
Okay.
Why? Because anybody with a concealed carry permit can carry in schools, any school,
Yeah.
from kindergarten all the way up to through college. Anybody.
Yeah.
So they haven't had school shootings there.
And
Who would
that's
you shoot
why.
first? The parent down the hall. Well, they got to go. What about the guy fixing the air conditioner? He could be armed, and it works. But
Well,
everywhere
I
else,
remember
you're right.
when I was in school, I had a few teachers who were I didn't know it back then, but I guess you would call them conservatives. One was a farmer, a retired. One was a retired, police officer. These guys would have been inclined to carry a gun. They can't now
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you would think that they want kids to be injured and hurt and killed.
If it
Crazy.
drives their agenda, I'm sorry, it's for the hardcore ones. Not everybody that's anti-gun, but for the very hardcore elitists at the top of the chain. I don't think they care. The kids are just a pawn. Yep. In fact, they probably are happy when this happens because then they can really get to scream. Now we got this real emotion we can use. I'm
It,
sorry. I
yeah.
really don't
It
think
it
that some
gives
of
them more
them.
blood to dance in.
Yeah, the
Yes. Yeah.
media can't wait. The media can't wait for the next school shooting, and they
If it's
know
the
that
right
they.
agenda, if it's the right person,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Got to be the right situation. If like what happened in Tennessee,
Yeah,
it's like whoop 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 whoop. Let's not talk about that. Then you have the situation. I'd love somebody to explain Nevada to me. Here we had the biggest shooting. Several hundreds of people were hit from the guy with the rifles up in the building, and
yeah.
boy, that thing just disappeared. I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
it's just
but you know what
gone.
they got out of that? They pushed for bump stock legislation. That's what
But
that was all
but they
about.
don't talk about it anymore.
I
I mean,
know.
you would think that would be leading news
We don't know
every
anything about
anniversary.
him. We don't know anything about him, his girlfriend, or any of the people involved. We don't know anything about what happened there. But now every soccer mom across the country knows what a bump stock is.
The other thing that
Yeah.
happened at that incident was National Concealed Carry Reciprocity was going on its way through Congress and
Hmm.
died when that happened. So
Yeah, they were also going to make silencers so that you didn't have to. They were going to take them off the list for the NFA, so you could buy a silence. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah, there were two major things that were in Congress that looked
let's
like
get
they
my
were going to
tinfoil hat
pass.
away.
No, but seriously, yeah, just magically, a week before the vote, we have the biggest mass shooting in the country, and we know nothing really about the details of that.
You know,
It's
it's once these events happen, it seems as though the media gets what they want out of it, and they move on rapidly. It's very much, from my perspective at least, about pursuing a narrative, not pursuing the truth. I mentioned earlier that mass shootings still happen in Australia fairly regularly. It gets back to what is a mass shooting. Well, depending on which set of statistics you use, 3 or 4 people being shot, and that could be bad guy shoots 2 people, cops shoot bad guy, 3 people, mass shooting. Happens a lot in Australia, but you never hear about it in the media because Port Arthur was supposed to have fixed all of that.
yes, and that's what we're told here. Well, look at Australia; they don't have any more mass shootings.
If we report there are mass shootings, well, that proves us wrong that taking away everybody's guns didn't solve the problem.
Right.
And as Dan mentioned earlier, we don't want to be found to be wrong. That's kind of what it boils down to. They just don't want to be wrong, and they don't have any real facts on their side. The more facts that come out, these studies that show, the more the people are equipped to defend themselves, the less vulnerable the prey are, the more cowardly the predators become. Just keep looking for where there is low hanging fruit.
But they want to disarm us, and that's what it's all about. It's all about that. Is from their point of view. They want to disarm us. We're the last real shining light when it comes to gun rights. You got Switzerland, and they are allowed to have, they're allowed to have a gun in the home, but they don't get to carry them around much. And and what I learned about Israel, it was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. How could you have, that's like if Canada had people that were trying to kill us on a regular basis, was basically at war with us in an undeclared war, and Mexico was sending people in to kill us, and we didn't have any guns except a few police here and there. And it's like, what? Man, if I would have thought that the Jews would have had, everybody would have had guns.
Well,
Just for what I was just so shocked at that situation down there.
look at Ukraine
Yeah,
having to arm its populace when they got invaded.
yeah, that's what they're doing in Israel. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
and that was the thing that the NRA, by the way, was formed because the North was a little ashamed of their poor during the American Civil War. The North was a little ashamed that their guys weren't very good shots. Well, they didn't push guns up north. Now the guys down south, and they were raised, shooting squirrels and hunting, and guns were a part of it. And so in the war, the Union was kind of taking it hard there for a while because they didn't have the trained troops. And this is where Ukraine is behind, and so is Israel. Okay, fine. A bunch of people in Israel want to get guns. Well, now they're at a point where they're picking up their first gun. They have to learn how to shoot. They got to learn all the safety, all that stuff. They could have been practicing for years and been one crack population you didn't want to mess with, and they didn't do it. I just blown away at that whole thing.
It's also what they're trying to do here in America. They're trying to bring the next generations up as non-gun owners or even anti-gunners, and that's why they've taken it out of schools. It's frowned upon. They're even they want to tax ammunition, so you can't go to the range, so because you don't want to take your kids and spend all that money on ammo, and so they're doing everything they can to make sure that the next generation is unarmed and helpless and doesn't
of course
know.
if your kid draws a gun on a piece of paper in school, look what happens. If they eat a cookie in the shape of a gun, if they say gun, the kids have got to be frightened to even mention the word gun. So I can see where they're going, well, boy, I want to stay away from that. Man, I can't even say the word and I get in trouble. And that's by plan.
Exactly.
It's by plan.
Yeah, it's conditioning. You're conditioning the children at a young age, and then they're gonna grow up very quickly, and they're gonna have kids of their own. It doesn't take long. They're gonna be in their 20s, and they're gonna have kids. 20 years goes by quick, and now that next generation will grow up without guns. And
this stuff is like treason to me. It's like treason.
Yeah.
These are people that are out to destroy the foundation of the country. That's treason.
It's a demonization of our founding documents, really, is what it is. It's a demonization of what our founding fathers built this country on.
And what made us the country that we are.
Yeah, if it wasn't for guns, we'd still be speaking with a British accent.
And that's kind of what happened in the sense that people actually were allowed to have guns. They used them to defend themselves. So you had a country that really had the opportunity. And when the British came to take them away, we said not only no, but hell no.
That's right.
I think a lot of Americans have sort of missed. We've just had perhaps the greatest example of the value of the U.S. Constitution just in the last few years. In most countries on earth, people don't have any rights. They're privileges given by their government or by their monarch. In Australia, they were literally rounding up people on suspicion of having contact with COVID.
I saw that.
Camps.
I saw that.
We've seen that in the 20th century before, and that didn't go too well. But that's because Australians don't actually have rights. They think they do, but they don't. Because the government can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. But this little guy says that the government can only do the things that are specifically written down in here and nothing else, and even has a list of banned stuff in the Bill of Rights.
But still, a lot of Americans will say that the Constitution grants us a right to carry guns. No, it simply protects that God-given right, that natural right, from the government touching it. The founding fathers said this is a jewel, and you're going to keep your hands off of it. But they couldn't help but get their fingers.
The 10th Amendment itself makes that very clear, that the Constitution doesn't grant anything to the people. It grants things to the government from the people. Everything originates with the people. That's why it starts with the people. And civics in this country must have been taught exceedingly poorly for the last couple of generations, because
That's by intent, but you're correct.
really
It's by
easy.
intent.
This is the easiest legal document I know of to read. When you try and read the Australian Constitution, your eyes are going every which direction before you're 3 sentences in. It's written by lawyers for lawyers. This is written by farmers for farmers. And it's really easy to read and understand. You don't need to be a legal scholar to get what it's saying. You might need to reconcile it against some of the crazy things the Supreme Court's done over the years, but you can know where you stand just by reading it on its face. That is unique in all of human history. No country has something like this.
And they want to get rid of it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So the shame of it is the government schools are not teaching the Constitution. They're not having the students actually read the Constitution and try to understand it. And when they do read certain parts of the Constitution, say the Second Amendment, they tell them things like it's a collective right, not an individual right, and they try to twist the words to their own advantage. So it's up to us as parents and adults to teach the younger generations the relevance of the Second Amendment and the importance of the Constitution and the meaning behind all of the words in that document. That was, I don't know how they came up with it, but boy, were they a bunch of geniuses back then, because
Yeah.
it is, you know, they use the term living document today in a sense that it's changeable to suit their needs. But the truth is, it's a living document in that it's timeless, and it applies whether it's muskets or ARs, or
Laser guns in the future.
whether we have internet, or whether we write with quill pens and hand operated printing presses. It's just that timeless of a document. And it's really important for us to educate the young people, because our schools are perverting that knowledge and they're suppressing that knowledge. They're trying to change history. They're trying to demonize the founding fathers and demonize the people that are fighting to keep the principles alive that this country was founded on.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the founding fathers and how they wrote. They were incredible writers. I particularly like the one from Ben Franklin that said, "I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." That in itself was short and expressed a hell of an idea about how you should write stuff. But Penn and Teller, they had a great thing on the Second Amendment. If you haven't seen the Penn and Teller thing on Second Amendment, you got to watch that. But at some point in there, they were really getting after this whole thing about, oh, it's for the militia. And they point out, no, it says not the right of the militia to keep and bear arms. It's the right of the people to keep and bear arms. I guess those hack, founding fathers didn't know how to write English. And it's just.
I always find dealing with that collective right issue is just to start reading the Fourth Amendment, and that's the one that says that you can't be arrested, you can't have your property seized, you can't be searched without probable cause, all that sort of stuff. And it starts off with the right of the people. So if somebody's trying to tell you that the Second Amendment is a collective right, so ask them do you believe that the right against unreasonable search and seizure is only for the collective body, for the states, that the federal government has the right to come and take your property, search your home whenever they want? Do you really believe that? Or do you believe that that phrase means that it's an individual right? And put them on the spot. Either the phrase means one thing or it means the other. Pick one.
The people is only used in a few places in the Constitution. I think it was 3 or 4 places it says the people. But it's clear who they're talking about.
And the authors even wrote elsewhere what that phrase meant. The right of the people, the militia, the whole body of the people. I think it was Madison who wrote
the Virginia Constitution's got that. It says a well-regulated militia consisting of the body of the people. Our Constitution spells it out, the body of the people. We're all part of this militia.
Yeah, and our founding fathers they saw these people coming, over 250 years away,
Yeah.
and and they knew what would happen because they understood humanity. The greatest thing is when you get lectured about gun laws by someone from the UK. They try to tell us, well, what do you need this for? What do you need? You don't need guns. You don't need. And I'm like, didn't we kick your ass 250 years ago? And how did we do it? We did it
They
with
still have
guns.
hard feelings about that. That's why they
Yeah.
don't want us to have guns.
They want to come back and then try to get us back again.
Yeah, they try to disarm us so they can get one up on us. It's not going to happen.
You
I
know they
see.
still call us traitors, right?
Yeah. I see where Abel Windsor pointed out kind of what I was heading with on the Second Amendment. Phasers would be included in the future. If they had the phasers like Star Wars had, that would be covered under the Second Amendment.
Yeah. So, what tips do we have for people talking to legislators that may not be as 2A friendly as some when we
I
go into
think
lobby day?
I think some of the things when you're talking, I think if you can make it personal, like how this affects you. The restaurant ban. You say, well, I take my family to the restaurant, and I want to make sure they're safe because you never know. The parking lot could have a problem. If I have to leave my gun in the car, I'm helpless in the parking lot. And you can point to something like, I don't want to have what happened here happen. It happened in Texas where a guy came into a restaurant and shot it up. And there were 4 people that had guns in their car, but didn't bring them in because it was against the law. Make it personal. Don't give them anything that's not. Some of them will understand the emotion, the personal side of it. Obviously, be polite, but you can be firm in talking about it. That's kind of what I would say. What does this mean to you? What does it mean to your family? What does it mean for the country? Think about it in those terms. Let them have emotion because they like to play on emotion. Well, we have emotions too. Don't be afraid to let them out.
And you can ask leading questions as well.
Yeah.
What is it that you're trying to accomplish, and how is it that this is going to accomplish that? Well, what about the people that don't obey that law? How are the people that do obey that law going to be affected by that? How are good people like myself and your family? One thing that always struck me, Philip, was you had that conversation with the reporter one time, and you might want to recount that when you asked her about her daughter.
Yeah, I had the Washington Post reporter spent all day with me 15 years ago, and all day. We went out to lunch and everything else. But at some point, I said to her, I said, you told me that. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, I assume you don't have a gun. She said, no, I don't have a gun. I said, so I also would then assume if you don't have a gun, if you find yourself face to face with the criminal, you would just give him whatever he wanted. And she said, yeah, that's what I would do. And hopefully nothing would happen. I said, but you told me you were a young mother. You've got a 4-year-old little girl. Are you going to give your little girl to him if that's what he wants? Is that what you're going to do? Just give her to him and let him walk away with your little girl? Her eyes. I mean, if flames could have come out of her eyes, I would have been totally, ashes on the floor at that point. It hadn't, believe it or not, it hadn't crossed her mind that
Yeah, they
somebody
don't
would
think.
want to attack her child.
Yeah, they don't think it. They don't think it that. They don't think it through. They just look at it at surface level. They know they're supposed to support gun control because they've been told to do that, and all their friends on their political side of the aisle do the same thing. So they know where they're supposed to be. And you can't always fix them with statistics. But one statistic that I really like is to let people know that there's up to 4 million violent acts, violent crimes every year in America. Up to 4 million, and some studies are a little less, some a little more, but maybe even up to 4.5 million. And there's only 333 million people in the country. So if you do the math, you got about a 1 in 83 chance of being the victim of a violent crime. And they don't always look at it like that. And sometimes when you look at it, like if there's 83 people in this room, one person is going to be a victim of a violent crime if they haven't already. And I don't like those odds. Do you? And if you can help people visualize that and visualize themselves or their like you said, their daughter or their kid or their relative being in a situation, it sometimes helps it click a little bit better.
Yeah, that it's not just them, because she was thinking I'd give him whatever he wanted. That he wouldn't. He just that's all that to her. He would want something from her, not from her
Right.
kid, not from her. It's wild. But by the way, Pat, before I forget, I do want to mention now, if you're talking one on one with a legislator, sure, you can ask them questions like you suggest, which is a great idea. A leading question sometimes will get person to think about their true position. If you ask them to go down a path they probably hadn't gone down and try to explain it to you, then lights sometimes go off in their head and go, wait, that doesn't sound very smart. But now in committee, you don't have that option. If you're going to be at the General Assembly and speak in committee, it's not a conversation. It's a monologue. You make your statement to them, and you can't say, well, I want to ask you this. Now, I mean, you could say that, but they're not going to answer you. It's supposed to be a monologue. They listen, you talk. So you can't ask them to respond to your position. Well, tell me how this would work. No, that's not going to go. I just want you to think along those lines. In the committee, sure, you can talk with passion about what you've got, but understand that don't ask them a question and expect them to respond. It's not a two-way conversation. In their office, it is. In the hall, if you meet them, it's a two-way conversation, just not in committee. And a lot of you know that, but some of you may be new to this. I just wanted to make that clear. And maybe next week I'll do a video and go a little bit over some of this stuff, how the way the committee structure works and stuff, and addressing a committee and all that.
I think there was some question.
Go ahead.
I think there was some question about some of the numbers. I just want to make that clear. There's about 4 million 4 million acts of violence, 333 million people in America. There's some questions in the million or billion. I think there was a concern there, so I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, million. You said million.
Yeah. Okay. So back to committees. You can ask a question without expecting an answer. So you can just throw it out there, what if, and to plant that seed. So you never know when a seed is going to sprout. A lot of times you talk to someone, you walk away, and then 6 months later something happens to that person, and it splashes water on that seed, which germinates, takes root, and grows. So whenever you're dealing with people, keep that in mind, that what you do and what you say now stays with them, tucked away in some little dark corner of their mind, until one day light shines on it. And you just never know with the people you touch how it's going to affect them.
Yeah, and you can say this is a rhetorical question, but how can this possibly stop crime?
Real quick, we're at 9 o'clock, so I want to get a couple of things in there about Lobby Day. Pre-Lobby Day dinner is 1 week from today. You can go online, vcdl.org/Lobby Day dinner, and RSVP. I'd like to get word to the restaurant by Wednesday how many people are coming. So go ahead and jump online and do that. The QR code you see on your screen goes to the Lobby Day main page. There's links to all of the sub pages there. Brandon Howard has his gun check bus. It will be 1 block away from Capitol Square on 8th Street between Grace and Franklin. The General Assembly building and Capitol Square are defense-free zones. However, 9th Street you can carry, just not on the sidewalk that is actually bordering Capitol Square. So on the street itself, which will be closed to traffic, and on the sidewalk opposite of Capitol Square, you can legally carry your defensive firearms. So rally is at 10 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock. Dan Wos is one of our speakers. We also have Jared Yanis. Philip will be speaking. Cam Edwards and Eric Pratt and Nick Freitas and John McGuire.
Yeah, there'll be a few others probably from the legislative side.
Yep. So
and by the way,
lineup.
if you have a pepper ball gun, you can't go in the buildings with that, but that would actually be something you should be able to carry in Capitol Square.
Right.
So you could go to the rally if you had a pepper ball gun, because that's not a firearm. And in fact, that I may well be wearing one of those myself.
So the rally lasts an hour. Teams will be forming at 9th and Broad Street starting at 8 a.m. So get there early. Get there early if you want to get parking close to the General Assembly. You can park on the street without having to feed the meters. If you park in a state parking garage, those are also defense-free zones. So, but there's plenty of other parking options. There's parking maps on our website. There's food maps. There's still plenty of room on all of the buses. VCDL.org/lobby day bus for the routes, the departure times, $40 a seat. If we fill up every bus, it only covers about half our expenses. So if you want to sponsor a bus, there's a link for that also on that page. And I think I pretty much hit all the points in a nutshell there.
Okay. I can also give a quick summary of some of the bills we're looking at right now, just to give people an idea. VCDL is getting a bunch of bills put in. You don't want to just be on the defensive. I think we can agree on that. If all you do is defense, you're guaranteed to eventually lose stuff because you're not moving the ball forward at all. All you can do at best is stand still. I don't want to stand still. We have a lot of damage done from 2020 and 2021. It's going to be tough because of the election, but we still can stand up and fight back. But Delegate Ware has put in a bill to improve our knife laws to give us some more options for those of us that want to carry an alternative weapon, maybe a less lethal weapon, concealed. Delegate Garrett, Tom Garrett, has got a bill that'll repeal this whole issue about carrying in Capitol Square and carrying in state agencies and government buildings. If you got a permit, kind of putting us back where we were on that. Senator McGuire has a bill that basically is constitutional carry. And Delegate Wiley has put in a bill that allows you, when you get in your car and you've got a firearm in the car, it's basically saying if you go to any parking lot that belongs to anything open to the public, they cannot ban you leaving your gun in your car in that parking lot. So that way, when you leave the house with a gun in your car, you know that you don't have to go, oh my God, what do I have to go here? Where am I going to park my car? You don't have to worry about that. And even Illinois did that right in their laws. And so he's put in a bill to do that. Another bill's going in that says if you buy a gun safe, you don't have to buy it from an FFL to get a tax credit. That bill is in there. But on the negative side, boy, we have so far those few bills. But on the negative side, we got, a quote unquote assault rifle or assault firearm bans of new ones, which they could easily change to existing ones, or they could move the date back and say, well, if it was made after 2019, then you can't have it, blah, blah, blah. They want to do that with magazines. Another bill says that you can't have your AR in public, except if you're going to a shooting range or something. So they don't want, even unloaded, they don't want you to be able to carry it anywhere with you. There's a bill to do that. They want, if you own a legal auto sear, which could cost you $10,000 to $20,000, which is something you can drop into an AR-15 to effectively turn it into like an M16. They want to make that illegal, which is perfectly legal under federal law if you bought it before 1968. They want to make it so you can't carry a gun in a hospital. I know some of the hospitals, most of them have some kind of a policy, but this would actually make it law as opposed to a trespass charge. They're expanding the taking your gun away for domestic violence against a girlfriend, somebody you're dating. Let's see, what else have we got here? They want a 3-day waiting period. Oh, that works so well. California has a 10-day waiting period, and they have all kinds of mass shootings. Their crime rate is double Virginia. Violent crime rate, according to the FBI, is double in California what Virginia is. So that 10-day waiting period really works well. So that's another one that's being pushed. And I talked about the restaurant ban. Zero problems, but let's go after these law-abiding citizens because somebody might feel uncomfortable if they knew that somebody in the restaurant might have a gun. Well, just don't go to restaurants. Eat at home. As for the people that are worried about it. They want to go after any. This is great too. These guys write these laws that don't know anything about guns. So the way this one bill is written, if you have a rifle built before 1968 or a handgun, anything back then it wasn't required by the law to serialize your gun. So there's millions of guns out there. And I used to have one from Sears. It's not serialized. It's not on there. It wasn't required till after 1968. Those guns, the way this thing is written, would now be illegal unless you took them to an FFL and had the FFL put a serial number on there. And some of those guns could be quite valuable. Made, I'm thinking, think about some of the guns back in those days that might not have a serial number, and that could lower the value of the gun to have it have a serial number etched on what might have been a pristine firearm. Then they want to expand that. If you're get a misdemeanor drunk driving, they want to take away your right to own a pistol for 5 years. Now, what is the nexus between driving a car and owning a gun?
There's no connection.
There's nothing. They want to punish you by taking away a separate, totally unconnected right because for misdemeanors. If nothing else, we're going to oppose this, and just basically also because it's a misdemeanor. But I'm going down the list. You can see how many bills. I'm not reading the duplicates and similar bills. I'm just giving you an idea of what they're putting in there, what they're hoping to get some of this through. Let's see. I talked about they don't want you to take the gun out of your house. In fact, the law that they're changing used to say you can't carry a gun with a magazine that will hold more than 20 rounds unless you have a concealed carry permit in Richmond and some of the bigger localities in Fairfax County and all that. They chopped all that out. They said it doesn't matter if it's loaded. It's across the state now. It's not just in certain localities. And they took away the concealed carry permit holder exemption. So you're not exempt. Doesn't matter how good of a citizen you are. You won't be able to carry your AR, really in public on any roads, streets, anything open to the public, anything. That could even be gun shops. If you think about it, think about that for a second. Gun shops are open to the public. I would have fun with this one in committee. This would be good. So you're telling gun shops that they can't have guns in there. Okay. They want to be able to go after manufacturers for civil liability on stuff. Again, take down the manufacturers. Oh, and they want to make it harder to get training to get a permit. Now, how does that make sense? They want us to have this permit, and we got to have that magical training. Well, then they should make sure it's easy. Oh, no. Now, if you're an NRA instructor or a USCCA, Concealed Carry Association instructor, your courses will no longer be good as training. You have to go to the Department of Criminal Justice Services and get certified by that bureaucracy to be able to teach a course to get a permit. That's how Looney Tune this is. Go ahead, Pat.
For a private instructor to go through that course, it's thousands of dollars for them to get certified under the Department of Criminal Justice.
That's a great point, Pat. I like that. Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, they're going to drastically reduce the number of available instructors. So, if their whole point is safety, like you said, they should be making it easier. They should be teaching firearms safety. I mean, real firearms safety and marksmanship in the schools. Yes. And they should start with kindergarten at age-appropriate safety and work their way up through the school system.
It's not about safety at all. It's very simple. The government doesn't want the citizens to have firearms because they've been abusing their power for so many decades that they're afraid the citizens are going to want a hard reset at some point.
Yeah, I wonder why, all these wonderful bills. And there's more coming. I guarantee they're going to be going after red flag laws. Now we have a bill going in to repeal the red flag, by the way. So VCDL behind the scenes, I got a bunch of people to put bills in for us. So again, we want to stay on the offensive, but while we're trying to repeal it, they're going to be trying to expand it. They're probably going to want to make it so that anybody just about can get a red flag against you, and maybe take out some of the other protections we've got. We've got the least egregious red flag in the country, but it's still egregious. So it needs to go. And there'll be more, and I'll keep everybody updated as more of these bills hit.
We have a comment from Rod about the governor can just veto the bills if
I'm glad he
they
brought it
get
up.
through both chambers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he can. However, we need to show up at lobby day first off to give him the incentive to veto any bills that do make it through. But even more importantly, our presence at lobby day and those halls flooded with people wearing the orange Gun Saves Lives stickers is going to do a lot to help prevent a lot of this stuff from getting through. I strongly suspect that some of these things are going to get through. We again have the the anti-right faction in control in the House and the Senate. I think some of these bills are going to get through this session.
And look,
So,
if you're talking about the governor doing it, you're putting all your eggs in one basket at that point. If he decides not to veto one of those bills, it could become law. You got all your eggs in one basket. Now, have any of you ever heard of the term horse trading? Is that a familiar term? What if they went to the governor and said, you've been wanting to do something about abortion. Well, all right. What if we do this? Would you then sign this bill banning AK-40 ARs and AKs, or would you go ahead and go with the don't let people carry concealed in restaurants? I mean, I'm not saying the governor would do that. I don't know. He hasn't been tested. He's never said anything about supporting gun control, but horse trading should absolutely scare you and bring you to the understanding that those things happen. I've seen it happen. Years ago, we got the full preemption. What we didn't know is a horse trade had been done between the House and Senate that was secret, and we didn't learn about it till later. The secret trade was the Senate wanted to ban guns being carried in the non-secure areas of airports. We used to be able to walk in the Richmond airport or any of the airports with a gun. As long as you didn't go near the secured area, getting on an airplane, you were buying a ticket and leaving, renting a car and leaving, helping grandma with her luggage and leaving, you were fine. But this is after 9/11, and the Senate said, we want to stop that. We don't want to allow that anybody to carry a gun in that area at all. And the horse trade was, okay, then we want full preemption from the localities. We don't want localities to be able to do any gun control. So we were thinking we could kill that airport thing easily. And when we couldn't kill it easily, we were going, what the heck? Why is that bill so hard to kill? And then we found out later it's because it was a handshake in the background. That was a horse trade. Now, in that case, I honestly think we came out miles ahead. Getting rid of all the local gun control across the state versus a little bit of gun control in an airport, non-secure area, which you don't go to all that often. But still, it's an example. And so let's not put our eggs in one basket. Let's get out there and see if we can stop or neuter these things to where they don't matter anymore. And then if we're depending on the governor to veto him, well, we'll lobby him. And it's important that he knows there's a big crowd of people out there. And if he looks out his window and sees a flooded Capitol Square, that will definitely help our case. That we are paying attention. This does matter to us, and we're not willing to stand by and let our rights be taken away. But I just wanted to say that. Don't just think, I don't have to do anything. The governor will veto it. That would be a severe mistake. Just to count on that.
all right, guys. We're at 9:15 here, so I think we need to wrap up pretty soon. Again, come to lobby day, drag all your friends, neighbors, and relatives kicking and screaming if you have to. We need bodies, and we need people to go into the building. So bite the bullet, check your guns at Brandon's gun check trailer. You make your reservations online. All of the links are follow that QR code or the web link that you see on your screen, and you can find all of the information you need from there. We've got stuff on the website. How does a bill become law? What is the schedule for the General Assembly? How do I find out who my rep is? Um, the legislative agenda, the bill tracker, the VCDL bill tracker. And by all means, if you're not signed up for the VA alert yet, get signed up, because they're going to come fast and furious when the session starts. And we're going to need you to click those buttons and send those emails in. So
Yeah.
that's all I've got. And wish you all
Yeah.
a great night, happy New Year, and see you next week.
Hey, Dan, I should have hung my SG standard guitar behind me.
Oh yeah.
I've got a 1970 mint SG standard guitar.
Oh wow.
I used to be lead in a rock band, believe it or not.
Yeah, I was always a Les Paul guy, and but I played the SGs. I love the SGs as well.
Yeah, it's mint. You can the backside looks like a mirror. Anyhow, yeah, thank you everybody coming up and listening to us. Again, you can let your friends know, give them a link to this. They can listen to what we talked about tonight on the car going to and from work, especially those of you in Northern Virginia, where even going around the block can take an hour or two, or those of you out in Tidewater, they have to go through the tunnel. So, and I want to thank our guest, Stephen. Thank you so much for coming on. If you ever want to write up something, let me know. We can put it in the VA alert. I think you probably got a lot you could talk about. I look forward to seeing you at Lobby Day. Dan, of course, I look forward to seeing you there as well and listening to you. Show up. There's a chance to shake Dan's hand. Dan, you're going to be at the pre-Lobby Day dinner, right?
Yeah, we're coming from New York, so I'm hoping we don't get stuck in traffic in D.C., but we're planning on it.
Okay, so you might be able to shake Dan's hand there. I think Jared will be there. Jared with Guns and Gadgets.
Yep.
And
Eric's going to be there. Eric Pratt. Good friends with Eric.
So should be fun.
French had said, "Are you sure that's not an assault guitar? They do call it an axe, right?"
That's true.
Don't tell them they'll ban it.
That's true. They might ban it. I'm in New York. Shh, be quiet.
Why have you got 6 strings on that guitar? Nobody needs 6 strings.
Right.
You got all the notes on 1 string.
Yeah, you can play any note you need on 1 string. You don't need 6 strings.
Yeah, there's only 8 notes, right?
Yeah. If you don't laugh, you're gonna cry. So you may as well laugh. Okay.
Yep. All right. Thanks to our guests, everybody. And thanks to everybody that joined in. And we will see you on the next one.
Thank you.